a little, right.
Right here. So, we're going to move on with a set of American folk songs based upon some of our most beloved rivers around which the United States was built. And we are going to be playing a medley of tunes including Down by the River, Shenandoah, and across, the Glendy Brook. So, here we go. Are we ready? better known as this German fighter pilot during World War I, the Red Baron. All right? So this is a very programmatic piece. It sounds like flying planes, and there's even a dive bombing section that you'll hear courtesy of the trombone section. So it's just a fun piece to play. In actuality, only 20 of his 80 kills were achieved in that famous Red Fokker triplane. But his most famous moniker came from his piloting officers, Red Alpha. These 80 victories came at a time in German air superiority when the enemy's aviation technology was considered superior, and it's probably worth pointing out that it was actually a Canadian who finally brought him down. So here's a fun piece by Eric Morales called The Red Baron. when we were planning this music program 4 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, we wanted to bring a little of America with us, so we brought those river folk songs. And we also have a bunch of, a nice little medley of a few anyway, American patriotic things here that we're going to play for you, including American Beautiful, When Johnny Comes Marching Home, which goes way back to the Revolutionary War times, Yankee Doodle Dandy, which is actually a Broadway tune from one of our great Broadway composers at the turn of the 20th century, George M. Cohan. You'll hear the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and another old tune called You're a Grand Old Flag, another George M. Cohan favorite. So here we go. there, Milwaukee was once known, and maybe still is, lovingly, known as the beer capital of the world. Miller, Pabst, remember all those good old beers that came, Schlitz, I don't know. Wisconsin was settled by a lot of German immigrants, a lot of Bohemian immigrants, and with them they brought their music, which was polkas and waltzes. And that music is still very popular, especially with our older generational crowds. Yet there's still Friday and Saturday night polka dances that you can attend in the northern part of the state, and we still love the music. So we thought it appropriate that we bring along the beer barrel polka. With our high school song, our fight song, which happens to borrow the melody from the Notre Dame University down in Indiana, their famous fight song, the Notre Dame Victory March. And Phil, oh, it's not the Notre Dame, it was on Wisconsin that
Yeah, the first song they played was the Wisconsin marching song, not realizing that it's also the Regina Rough Riders song. I might have told them before, but let's see what happens.
So we shouldn't say go Vikings then?
No, but you can say whatever you want. But we are the Kimberly Papermakers in Kimberly, Wisconsin. Big paper-making producing part of the state. Still is, not to the extent it once was. But anyway, here's the Kimberly High School song. Here we go. 1, 2, and go!
Anybody want to say hi to anybody? No? Wave to your... Wave, Emma. Julia. Wave. Anybody else? Say hi to their mom, dad, grandpa, grandma. Whoever might be watching. Anybody else want to wave to their mom, dad, whoever?
Timing, but it was
Say hi. I know your mom's watching.
We want to make sure they're in rotation. Yeah.
Okay.
Just so we know they're all here.
Okay. Our last little buys, right?
Thank you for watching.
Oh, sorry, say it again.
Thank you for watching.
We'll see you guys tomorrow, right?
Late.
Late. Okay.
Super late.